Evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Hello.
Evening.
How is everyone?
Good.
Excellent.
How's your ankle, Diane?
It's mostly better. I can get shoes on, but they look a bit at the top. But it's not bruised now. It's just a bit swollen around the ankle bit.
Right. Not tap dancing yet, then.
No, I can run upstairs though, which is good.
Yeah. Good
So,
stuff.
but thank you for asking. So they said it could be like weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
So, but I can walk on it and get about all right. So,
Oh, it's not so bad then. Getting
no.
there.
Yes,
I missed something. What have you done?
I fell off a chair on New Year's Day, sober.
Notice that caveat a bit quick.
It was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was getting a box of cereal off the top of the cupboard. I turned round, and the next thing I knew, I was sat on the floor, and my ankle hurt quite a lot, and so did my bum actually, and my elbow. But it was the ankle that was the serious problem. And after 13 days of looking at it, going, "Oh, it's getting better. I'm sure it is." I did go to A&E and have it X-rayed because it wasn't broken. It was just sprained.
Well, better than peak bee season.
Oh God, yeah. I would have been right in trouble then. But yeah, we are on the mend. I'm just going to close some of the things I've got open because I seem to have spent half the day with lots of programs open and haven't actually shut any of them yet.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mike.
There wasn't one last night, was there?
No, someone did log in because I
Katie
get
messaged me and said, "We want bee chat tonight." I was like, "No, it's tomorrow." She was like, "No, you've missed it too. It's last night." I was like, "No."
No. Someone did log in, and I wasn't there. So
Good evening.
I'd been drinking. I thought KT must have been just off a trolley.
good evening, Paul.
I'm only nipping in to say hi, and then I'll have to shoot off.
Right,
Tomorrow.
okie doke.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Michael.
I am just so it's everyone had a really good day.
Oh, wonderful.
There was a touch of, oh my God, I'm sick of lockdown there.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah. This is my therapy after work. This is, I tell you.
Right. Fair enough. You've
At least the bees are flying again.
This is my therapy.
Ah,
Yeah.
is that a glass been lifted? I'm concentrating
Yeah.
on getting to the right bit in a
It's,
catalogue.
it's the
It
end of
seems
half
to
a
be-
bottle, so I'll probably have to take my video off later before I fall asleep.
Right. Did we all have pancakes on Tuesday?
No.
Did you all forget?
No,
I'd
we're
whine.
saving it to the weekend.
Oh no. See, one of the times I realised I was an actual grown-up was when I realised I could have pancakes any day of the year and I didn't have to wait until Shrove Tuesday.
Well, we were going to wait because we can then do a whole batch and freeze a load of them.
We made a massive jug full and ate them all. Um, but that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about, and then you give something up. So I have given up pancakes for Lent. I thought that was a very
love it.
fair deal. So we are at only 3 minutes past. It's a bit early to start, isn't it?
So
So-
you had them with honey and lemon.
I had honey on 1, I had Nutella on 2, and I had cheese and pesto on 2.
Oh, that's weird.
Not necessarily in that order.
Pesto.
Um,
I would never think of putting pesto on a pancake.
oh, it's really
neither.
good. It's really, really good. I'm
would
trying to
need
think
be
what.
on a savory. It would need to be on a rye or a rye pancake,
Trust me,
like they do
it
in
worked.
Brittany.
I did black cherries flambéed in brandy on top of ice cream in pancakes one year.
Whoa, that sounds good.
Very tasty.
Did anyone ever go to the Pancake House in Manchester?
I wanted to
we
open
are-
a franchise of this in Southport. I thought it would be a fabulous thing to do, but I never got off my backside to do it. But yeah, it's a good formula. It's really excellent. Because people in France, they go for a whole meal. You see, they have savory pancakes, which are galettes made with rye flour, and then they have sweet ones. So because they have so many, it's a very your overheads are next to nothing. Just made a bit of batter every day, and just throw things a bit like pizza. You just throw things on and
Yeah.
serve. Yeah, but it's delicious.
Yeah, I think I only actually went in the Dutch Pancake House, it was called, on the corner of St. Peter's Square. I only went in
there-
once, I think.
There was a
Oh.
French one as well at one stage.
Yeah, I don't think I went in that one, but yes, there used to be
Good-
lots of really good places to eat in Manchester.
The good thing about pancakes, of course, is that they're not very fattening. So we always put a load of fruit, ice cream, maple syrup,
That's a load of crap.
squirty cream, and chocolate sprinkles on them to make up for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With Nutella on, we'd run out of bananas, so there was no banana chopped up on it to make it even vaguely healthy. But they were very, very good.
Katie apologises she can't make it tonight. She's got a study group.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of people who are doing studying, which Kerr sent his apologies as well to me. But yes, if you can't make it, you're excused. And one day I'll switch it on and there'll be no one here because you'll all actually be out doing your bees. I might have to move it later when it gets to the middle of summer, I think.
Do you record them? Can you, if you miss it, can you catch it up? Can you do a?
I do record them, yes. They're on YouTube. They're on the Beekeepers is the name of the channel. I'll send you a link, but message me because I am shockingly forgetful.
That's fine. I mean, I just thought if you missed one, it'd be nice to be able to
Yeah.
catch it up if you could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I won't miss one, but you never know.
Yeah, right. It is 6 minutes past. I'm going to be wildly optimistic and assume that there's not
Go
been
for it.
millions of people knocking on the thing to come in. Right. Tonight, I thought we would cover a little bit about bee space because it is a really interesting concept that gets lots written about it. And it gets very confusing because there's so many numbers involved. So I thought we would have a bit of a look at bee space. And there's one person coming in. So the important thing to realise about bee space is that queens and drones are bigger than worker bees. And we have to think about why this difference is useful. So can someone throw a reason why this difference might come in useful?
Queen excluder, stop and get queen
That's-
going into the supers.
That's the one we can control where the queen is. So we need to know a little bit about how big bees are. And I want to say no bees were harmed during the making of this picture. However, it was already dead. Most of its legs had fell off, and by the time I'd finished, they all had. But I think that was mostly frustration because I wasn't sure how hard to squeeze this bee to get an accurate thorax measurement. because I started with the idea, if I knew how big a worker bee thorax was, and that's the deciding bit because that's quite stiff and you can't push that up very much, then that might help me do this presentation. And I decided we'd ignore that, but after I'd spent some time trying to get a photo, but it did amuse me trying to get a measurement. So bee space is lots of different things, really. It's how much room bees need to work, and it's the space that they can't get through. So it's also the spacing of frames in the hive and whether they're top or bottom bee space. And lots of you might have heard of top or bottom bee space, and you might just not quite understand what that actually means. And if you've only ever touched one type of hive, the chances are you don't need to worry about top or bottom bee space. Apart from understanding it will help you a little bit in making sure when you put kit together, you put your kit together right. So top bee space and bottom bee space. Top bee space is when the tops of the frames are level with the sides of the boxes. So on the right, we have top bee space, and someone's going to tell me it's the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah, the other way around. That's why that's written that way. Top bee space, you have a gap there, and bottom bee space, you have the space at the bottom. Yes, Fran?
Sorry, I was just
Sorry, the
telling you
mute
it's the
kept
other way
disappearing
around.
off the
Oh,
screen
right.
every time.
Sorry.
I bought some. I haven't got bees yet, but I bought some hives which I made up, and they're designed to be bottom bee space. So you bring the top of the frames up, level with the top by putting the runner in. Yeah. The only bees that I've been able to see was somebody in our bee club who kindly let me go along with her and watch her inspection. And they said, they took out the runners because they found that it was easier to clean the top if they didn't have the runners in. Otherwise, you've got a dip where you can't clean very easily. But and they said they took out their runners in the end. But wouldn't I? My concern is if I didn't put the runners in, that somewhere along the line I would have too big a space, wouldn't I?
Or if you did it to all of the boxes.
Sorry, say that again.
If you equalize it so that there's no box with top and not, so they're all without runners, all the frames will be at the same size.
Right.
And I discussed with Nick why we don't do this, because he understands the woodwork side of putting things together and why we wouldn't. And you can just end up with a bit of space either side, and it just gets confusing when you put queen excluders on, although if you use plastic queen excluders, they have no bee space.
Yeah,
so
but
actually,
I bought the ones on a frame at your recommendation or somebody's recommendation. I bought ones in the frame to replace the plastic ones. And I keep thinking, so now am I going to end up to have somewhere where they're going to want to fill it up with something if I didn't put the runners on?
We'll come on to what they'll fill up in a bit. But the reason, I don't really understand why it would matter that much if you didn't have runners on. If you have a framed queen excluder, then you might have a much bigger gap for them to fill up with comb.
Yeah.
And then they will fill that up with comb. Whereas if you put a framed queen excluder on top of that, it would be a bee space.
Yeah.
So then they might still put some comb there, but they might not put very much.
Right. Because I'm in two minds whether I need to put the runners on or not.
The runners,
see, when I've just recently made my boxes up, I've got new ones, and they were all flat packs, so I've had to make them all. And I didn't pay much attention the first time round. Like, I literally did what the man told me on the video. I had no thought process as to why I was doing it. This time round, I paid a bit more attention, and now I'm aware that I've got a bottom bee space. And the reason the runners are important, once you put your runners in first to measure up how you're going to close your boxes, so you know exactly the height of the frames. So like once your runners are on, you then measure, I think it's 11 millimeters from the top downwards, and that's the exact spot in which your box becomes together, and that's the space that it needs for the frames. So I think if you take away the runners, you're just going to end up with just a little bit too much space at the top.
Yeah, and I'm in two minds. I mean, I probably will put the runners on because I can always take them off again if I wanted to. So
they come off dead easy. They just
Well, the
Yeah.
problem at the moment is trying to find screws that will go in the holes, because I'd rather put them in with screws if I might want to take them off again.
They only go on with thin nails, but
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like little pins, isn't it?
are they plastic or metal?
The runners are
Yeah.
metal.
The runners are metal, because
Yeah.
a lot of the hives come with plastic runners. It's that gin.
Oh, they
Um,
can see it, yes. Yes, it is. It's slow gin.
If you've got metal runners, that they are, although it might sound horrible if you scrape them to get propolis off them, I think it's less worrying than if you scraped plastic ones that you might, if you were a bit keen.
Yeah, no, they
with a
are
sharp
metal. They are
hive
metal
tool.
ones.
But this is top bee space, and the runners are only a little bit up, and they've got a bit of a slope on that side, so it's quite a smooth
Yeah.
gap there.
Yeah, mine are like that. They're straight, and then they've got the slopey bit.
So the idea is, if you put a plastic queen excluder on that, it sits directly on it. And the reason I don't like that is when you lift it up, they will have welded it down
Yeah.
all the way along. So you're doing that, and eventually you'll ping it up and you'll be bees going everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's fine if they're worker bees, apart from the fact you'll annoy them a bit. But if it's your queen and she pings out of the hive, you're in trouble. But
Yes,
if you've got
yeah.
framed ones,
I
then
bought some frame ones, so
if you put the bee space gap on top, there's room for the bees to get over these frames. Whereas if you put it the
Yeah.
other way up, they have to
Yeah.
come up through the queen excluder, so it's a bit harder for
yeah.
them.
So basically, I can do either then, and it wouldn't cause a major problem.
I'd put the runners on and leave
Yeah.
them on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just need to
Yeah,
find
I'd
something.
keep
I don't
one
really
on.
want to put them on with pins, because if I take them off
Yeah.
to clean, I'm going to keep putting them on and off in the same holes, aren't I?
Yeah, but that's fine.
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
keep
fine,
them on. Never needed to clean them much in there because your frames sit on
Okay.
top. These aren't
I
really on
might
it.
I might
if
just
you-
stick them in with pins then. Be a lot easier.
Dead easy. Yeah.
If you've got lots of propolis, it really glues it up. I'm going to do a session about hive inspections, and then we'll actually get this box and we'll take frames out of it properly. But when they're glued up with propolis, it makes your life really miserable, because you can't do some of the things you can do that make your life easier. So being able to clean them is quite useful, but sometimes it's actually cleaner to move all the frames into a new box and just take that one away and clean it properly than try and give it a bit of a scrape. So the top bee space sits with the frame at the bottom. So you've got a gap at the top, and that's all the difference is. And as long as all your boxes are the same, it doesn't really matter what how you've built them, apart from if your hives are supposed to be top bee space and you've built them wrong, you might have a gap at the bottom of here just because of the way the assembly works. But that's to do with building the boxes and then measuring this bit. If you don't get that runner right, then it won't be quite level. And if there's not enough space for a bee to get through, then that they'll be a bit cheesed off with you. But it's not hard to do. But the reason we only have one type in a hive is so that if you mixed it, then if you mix top bee space with a bottom bee space, then you end up with a much bigger gap, and they'll fill that with brace comb. Whereas if you have bottom bee space and you put it on top of a top bee space, then you have no room for bees to get through there. So you're going to crush bees when you put that down. And there's the arguments made that if you have top bee space, you don't crush the bees when you put boxes on top. But you wouldn't anyway, because the box underneath, if you had top bee space, would have top bee space for the bees to get to. But when they're on flat edges, you want to use your smoke to get them away so you're not crushing them. But you don't want to make big spaces like that, because the bees do terrible things with it. If you give them a space that's bigger than they really need, then they go a bit crazy. And I know this is supers looking down, but the problems with brace comb like this is that your if your queen's up in there, you can't inspect, you can't take frames out because you might tear a piece of comb. The queen might be in it. She might get drowned in comb. She might get covered in honey. She might get pulled out of the hive while you take frames out because you can't see what's there. So the more odd comb you have in your hive, the worse it is for you doing your inspections, because you're not going to find where the queen is. You're not going to be able to keep it all clean and tidy. If you can imagine when she took the frames out of this hive, it was very sticky, it was very messy, and she had to use quite a lot of smoke to try and make sure the queen wasn't down in there, because that could have been a complete disaster. But if you have that sort of space, they are going to build big lumps of comb in there, and you don't want that, because that is potentially a nightmare. And we'll ignore the nail going down through the top, because we all know that isn't how you nail frames. I know the lady who did this, and she said, oh, can you come and have a look at my hive? So I did, and I said, can I take a picture of that? It's so pretty. But yeah, don't give them space to make brace comb. So what we said right at the beginning is this idea of bee space that bees can get through is really, really useful, because for the queen excluder, the standard European spacing for the wires in one is 4.3 mil, which means the queen's thorax is bigger than that, but the workers can get through fine. And just a reminder that a framed queen excluder has a bee space, but a flat one, either plastic or pressed metal, doesn't. And that's just something to think about, how difficult it's going to be to take that queen excluder off. If it's sat on top of frames, then it will get welded down. And the best thing you can do is, when you do your inspection, is to take off any bits of burr comb off the top, any little bits of brace comb they're starting, and keep it clean, because otherwise you give them something to build on. And it's sort of like saying it's all right to make a mess in the hive. But don't ever spend too long doing it. And if they start getting grumpy with you, shut them up. If you've had a very long inspection, then sometimes I'd say leave it and don't scrape the wax off. So pollen stripping, the one I've got, we've tried measuring these holes and they're near a 4.4, which probably means it knocks too much pollen off. But a 5 mil gap acts quite nicely as a pollen stripper. And if you buy the pollen grid from a Bello, the holes in that are 5.1 mils. So it allows the worker bee to go through, but it's going to shave some of the pollen off the outside of the legs. And again, that's useful if you want to collect pollen from your bees, but never over collect pollen. And then you can have a drone excluder. And the idea of this is that it allows the workers and queens to go through, but the drones can't. And if you've ever put a brood box with a queen excluder underneath and you go back the next week, there will probably be dead drones stuck in it because they can't fit through a queen excluder. But the idea of a drone excluder, I mean, why might you want to exclude drones from somewhere in your hive? Can anyone think of a reason?
Like, you wouldn't want them to go up and eat from the super. But equally,
the queen excluder would stop them doing that.
If you want to go out and mate, then you could exclude them from going out, couldn't you?
You could. If
bad
perhaps,
food, maybe bad, horrible genes.
Yeah,
You're trying to get
that would be a reasonable reason. I couldn't think of very many reasons at all why you'd want to stop the drones.
Only to stop them going mating. That's the only reason I think you could,
yeah, because
you would do that for, to keep them out. Yeah,
and for the most part, the queen excluder does everything we need it to do, because it's normally the queen we don't want laying in the supers, and we're not quite so bothered about the drones. So we concentrate on it being a queen excluder, but it also excludes the drones. If you can think of another reason for a drone excluder, then let me know. So a 6 mil gap. This is written down as the smallest space they'll leave between comb surfaces. And it might be at the outside of the box. but it's just another in a huge list of numbers where you can go through all the different numbers and say, all these numbers have some relevance. And I suspect you could get the calipers and measure absolutely everything in the hive and get every number from 0 to 100. The 7 mil is supposed to be the spacing that will be left between frames when you have Hoffman spacing, because they're spaced 35 mil and the top bar's 28, which leaves this 7 mil gap. And I've got some frames to look at in a bit. But again, this is just a random number in a big line of numbers that you really don't need to worry about. Because 9 mil is the top end of bee space that you normally need to know about. And 9 mil will let 2 bees work comfortably back to back in the brood nest. So it means they can get on with what they're doing, they can work in the supers, and they can get on and they can do everything they need to do. So normally we say it's about 5 to 9 mil. But for your normal beekeeping, the bee space you need to worry about is when you're building your boxes and the queen excluder. And after that, they are just really numbers. Brace comb, this is what we talked about before. Anything bigger than 9 mil, they'll show you what the gap is when it's bigger than 9 mil, because they'll build some brace comb in it. And if you've ever leave a frame out of your brood box or your super and they've got a flow on, they will draw it with comb and they will fill it with honey, and then you'll have this big gap filled with comb, because that's what they like to do.
Try and be quiet, darling. I'm on.
And that leads to brace comb. And I can't emphasize the spacing for frames enough. Just because you don't want to end up with supers like that. You can't extract it, you have to crush it. You're going to end up with dead bees in it. It's going to be right messy. So the gap between the frame bottom bars in the bottom box and the floor. Now, lots of people say, why don't the bees draw lots of comb in that? And sometimes they will. They'll draw an inch or so, maybe half an inch under your frames, but generally they don't. But if you're going to do a unite, then you need to check the bottom of those brood frames. So before you unite this box and put it on top of another, you need to check there's no lumps of comb under there, because if there is, that's going to push up against the floor and you won't be able to get that box on nicely. So that's really important to consider. If you put a super in a brood box, they will fill that comb and get that down to about the same level as the actual frames you've got in there. I've never had an incidence of a brood comb being stuck to the floor by them extending down, and I assume it's a bit drafty underneath, so they don't actually ever consider that as an option. So this bee space, and this is another set of numbers, there's somewhere it's written as 5.3 to 9. There's another I found as 4.5 to 8, 6 to 9. And you really don't need to stress too much about it for your normal beekeeping, because the bees will tell you whether the space is too big or small. Because if it's too big, they'll fill it with brace comb, and if it's very small, they'll fill it with propolis. And so that's the deciding factor in deciding, was that space too big? Yes, it was, because the bees have filled it with comb. So frame spacing. I'm going to switch from this to the best guide that I have found for information about frames. And it's in the Thorns catalogue that you can download. You don't have to order one by the post, but it has got everything you need to know about the different frame sizes. It's got all the measurements on. It tells you what all the different types are. Tells you how much they are if you want to buy millions of them. Always buy them in the sales if you can, because they're lots cheaper. But this explains the different types. So we have, if you remember which number you want, like I like DN4s and SN4s because that makes life easy. The DM1s and SM1s are cheaper because it's a much simpler design. They're just flat edges, whereas the Hoffmans have got this shaped bit on, and the Manley are really good for supers because they're straight all the way down. It makes it easier to uncap because it allows the knife to go all the way along, whereas with the narrow ones, the comb will be much further out, and you quite often end up using a lot more wax off the top to actually extract. And you can buy the SN4s, which have got like the Hoffman spacing, which does actually make it really easy to space them. But this explains it in far more depth than you need to know. And if you've got different types of frames, it tells you all the sizes and the different bits for that. And there's stuff in one of the other catalogues, but I just don't think it's quite as comprehensive as this. It is a bit small to read in the print version, to be honest, but luckily they do an online version. And if you ever wanted to know the measurements, they are all there. But why you need to know the measurements, I don't know. You just need to know what frames your hive takes and make sure
For exams.
The ones.
They will ask you that sort of thing in exams.
They don't ask you how big the frames are, thank goodness, because I'd never remember.
You're supposed to know it anyway,
yeah.
for some reason.
But it's useful if you want to know what a Manley frame is or how big the Langstroth frames are. It is all there for you to go and look at. So we'll go back to that. So this one on the left is a 14 by 12 national end rail, side rail as we call them. And this is a standard one. So you can see it's quite a bit deeper. And then this is an SN1 super frame. And they're called D for deep and S for shallow or super, if you like. So you always know what you're ordering, but write it down somewhere if you can't remember that, you know, the type you like best are, and if you're like me, you will soon get used to hammering the nails into the funny sides on these. It is a little bit hard when you start beekeeping to get used to doing that. If you've done lots of woodworking in the past, it'll be dead easy. But these are much easier to nail together, but I think they're a bit more of a nuisance for spacing. And I'm just going to give you an amazing hint here about plastic spacers. The idea of the plastic spacers is you use them on non-Hoffman frames. So these are Hoffman frames because they've got this pointy bit and a square bit. So that does the spacing. But if you wanted to remember what year you'd put them on, rather than writing on the frames, which is much cheaper than buying spacers to do it, then you could use the right colour spacer because they're available in a great big range of colours. But this hint came from Francine, and what you do is it's very good if you're learning or you've got a training apiary that you have people to put a different colour spacer on either side, and when they're spaced that way in the entire hive, if you take the frame out, if you're a new beekeeper, you will take the frame out, you will look at it like that, you will then remember that you're supposed to do something like this, and you'll do this, and then you'll go to put that back in the box, and the chances are you've turned it round and you're going to put it in with the wrong way round. And when you start in beekeeping, you want to make sure you keep the frames in the same order that you took them out, and doing that is going to make sure that the right side faces the right way all the time. So thank you very much for that hint, Francine. That was really good. You don't need spacers on if you've got Hoffmans, but you can put them on still. You will find they get propolis on though if you've got bees like mine, and you can never ever take them off. And you can try, but you sort of spend half an hour chiseling them away, and levering against here, and in the end you give up and you've got half of them off. But they are optional. If you've got the SN1 frames, then putting the Hoffman spacing on allows you to keep them at the right spacing until they're all really well drawn, and then you can just finger space them. And once they've actually had bees on them for a while, they're much easier to stay where they should be in the box. Otherwise, a brand new box like this one, these frames would really slide about because there's never been propolis in there. So that is the end of that one. Have I made it more confusing or less confusing, or you still don't care about bee space?
One of the things I thought when you were just going through that last bit was, because you get quite a lot of marker pen for marking the queens, or paint in the, you could actually use that paint. So like 2020's frames could all have a blue blob on them.
Yeah.
And get double use out of the queen marking kit.
Yes, I've done that.
I don't know how long it lasts.
Oh, it lasts for a very long time. I do that mostly because before I use one of those Posca pens, I put a big blob of it on a part of the hive somewhere and get a blade of grass and paint the bee with the end of the blade of grass dipped in the colour.
Yeah.
If you just use the pen, then you get it over the wings, you get it over her abdomen, you get it in her eyes. It is really, really messy.
Yeah, quite like that idea. Not of drowning the queen, but
yeah,
of marking the flames with the colour, because I've got plenty of pens and things for the next couple of years. Yeah,
and those Posca ones will last forever. Now, someone's asked, will it affect the bees if the bee space is at a slant? I'm going to have to ask you, Rodri, what do you mean at a slant? Do you mean the whole box on a tilt? Can you unmute if you're there?
I mean, if you get a second-hand hive, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Rodri, yeah.
If you get a second-hand hive and the frames are poorly made and the bottom bar of the frame is sort of at an angle, will it affect the bees?
Do you mean the bottom rail?
Yes.
Yes. I'd get the frames replaced as soon as possible. I have a lovely picture of someone I know who used to keep bees with one of his frames, and he basically didn't make them very well, and so the bottom rails were falling apart as he's lifting this frame out. So you want them nice and secure, and I wouldn't ever suggest hammering nails into frames whilst there are bees on them. However, I have been with someone whilst holding an umbrella, actually, whilst he sawed the ends off frames in the rain so they'd fit in a modified box he'd bought. And you want things nice and level. So it sounds a little bit obsessive, but when you make your hive stands and you put your hive somewhere, if they're tilting like this, then that's no good. You can have a little tiny bit of a tilt because the bees will live with that. But the more off you are, the more the bees are not going to be quite right in there, because you'll have frames leaning against each other and touching where they probably wouldn't normally. If your hives aren't on a flat surface, a flat solid surface, and they start to sink because your supers get heavy and it's wet in summer, then you need to do something about that, because if a hive starts to tilt and the bees are putting more honey on one side because there's a bit of a tilt and they just end up there, the hive's going to carry on sinking, and you really don't want hives falling over with heavy supers on. Yes, 11 frames in each now, Yvonne. There are people who just not very enthusiastic about hammering, and there's someone who claims his frames are great with 8 nails, and what I'd recommend is you waste the money and blow those extra 3 nails and make sure your frames are put together right. A box of nails from all the retailers is a couple of quid, and so you should never ever run out of nails. Just next time you do an order, put a box of nails in, and then if you think you're running out, you won't because you've got spares. But this 11 nails bit is really important for making sure that your frames are put together right. And even though these have only got pictures in, they've been put together right. I will say for the price of the box, I should hope so. But I don't know if you're going to be able to see, there's a nail in this pointy bit there. Who uses 6? Oh, no, you've got to use 11. You've got to have.
10, isn't it? 10.
It's 11. Right, I'm going to count them. No.
Oh, hang on. A bet. Let's have a bet.
Let's have a bet that there will be 11 frames in this.
There will not be 11 nails.
There will. There's a nail here, this side.
Where? Yeah.
There's one there.
2 there.
One there.
2 there.
One there. That's 4.
No, I put one on either corner of that, the angle bit.
No, there's you only need one either side. So there's one there.
No, but on the angle bit, I put one either side. I put one in, so I put 3 on each corner at the top.
Of there, you put 2 here.
Yeah. On either side, I put one either side.
You only need 11. See, you're being a bit enthusiastic
it's not 11,
now.
It's 10. It's
I
10.
think it's a 15.
It's 11
No.
because of the 3. The 3.
3 and 3.
Don't watch that Thorns video. They're wrong, Jan. It's definitely 11.
It's 2 in each corner. It's 2 in each corner, which is 8, and 3 in the bar, which is 11.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's 4 in the bottom. It's 4 in the bottom.
Four in the, let's start again. Right.
Okay.
First of all, you nail an end on, and I could go and.
What do you mean
fetch
nail an
this
end
stuff.
on? What's that?
You get your sidebar, and you put a nail there and a nail the other side, and then you put this side on. So you put a nail there and a nail there. Is someone keeping count? That's 4.
4.
Lift it up a bit. Lift it up a bit.
Right, so
Come
we've
on,
got the
show
4
us.
nails in there, and then what we do is we put a bottom in.
8.
So that's
8.
2 more. So that's 6 because we've only put
Either
one
side.
bottom rail in.
Okay.
We then put our wax in, and then we
Yeah.
nail the wax in with 3 nails on this this slip bar.
Well, it's 13 then, isn't it?
No.
No.
You're skipping
And then
on nails.
we put the last bottom rail in with 2 more. And if you've been counting, that's 11. It's
Yeah.
definitely 11. Eddie, it's definitely 11.
You know the angle. You know the angle bit that does the.
Yeah.
You've got a flat bit at the top. I put one either side.
But you only
So
need
there's 2.
No,
Yeah,
it's
but
especially
listen,
on the flat side, isn't it?
Belt and braces, isn't it?
How do you get away with that? With I have not when I put mine together, I had trouble with the wood splitting on.
So
some
what
of
do
them.
what you do? If you put it
in
flat,
one in each
you put
side,
it
you've got to
flat,
split it.
if you put the frame flat
Yeah.
and you tilt one end of the frame so the other bit goes up a little bit.
No,
you
no,
can
you
bang
have to learn to hammer at an angle, and it's sorted then.
No, you don't have to.
These are so hard till you get the hang of it. But no, 11. Ignore any video or anyone that tells you it's a different.
Hang
number.
on. Let me just.
Let's make one. Paul's got a video, but Paul's not been able to stay tonight to get the video out. But trust me, it's 11, and these have been made quite nicely.
Definitely 11, Diane.
Say that again, John.
It's definitely 11. If you're having to put 13 in, you're wasting 2 nails.
Yeah, but you've just seen I know that goes that way round. So, and I know it doesn't matter.
And if you reuse your frames, if you clean them and reuse them, you know exactly where your nails are, and you know how easily they're going to come out again.
Yes, that's all right, Rodri. You get good at it. You'll be a beekeeper forever. But yeah, if you want to know anything about frame sizes and details, then get a bee catalogue, because you really don't need to know all those numbers at all. And it is quite interesting when you get frames to compare, just how much easier it is to space those Hoffmans. And once you've used Hoffmans in your super, you'll never ever want to buy the cheaper ones again, because I think for the effort of getting them spaced better, it's much nicer. So someone else asked a question about 20 nails ago. Queen excluder space with the bottom B space brood box. with a bottom space bee box, the flat queen excluder does indeed potentially squash bees, pardon me, on the top. Well, a framed one won't. I'd just say buy framed queen excluders. They're much nicer to use. They don't ping your bees off in the air. They make your life much better.
I've been trying to find one for my Maysmore, and I've not been able to find one. So I was hoping Paul, I'm going to phone to Paul because I think Paul uses Maysmore, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Have you got, what do you use, Lorraine, on yours for the queen excluder? Is that plastic?
I've got plastic, yeah, just nasty plastic ones.
Yeah, that's what I've got, and I want to get rid of it.
It's hard to clean, isn't it? They're hard to clean, aren't they?
Well, actually, I don't mind it. I don't know. I have got very propolisy bees as well, but I've not found it awful yet. But they've only been in for one, summer.
Yeah, I think Thorns is probably the best queen excluder. Thorns are quite reasonable. They're wooden queen excluders. They're well made.
They did some unframed ones.
They do unframed ones, yeah.
The unframed ones you can buy and put a frame on, if you're clever at that sort of thing. And they sold some stainless steel queen excluders one year, ridiculously cheap because they were slightly not square. And I'd said to Nick, gosh, these would be good, but they're not square. And he said, that doesn't matter because you just make your frame slightly different and they all fit. So I've got some really nice stainless steel ones, better than the normal metal ones.
Just ordered some off Simon the Beekeeper because they're only like £9.50 each, one of the framed ones.
Yeah.
So that was quite reasonable.
For the convenience of not pinging your bees up in the air,
exactly.
I think it'll make your beekeeping so much nicer.
Yeah, I was getting to fit the Maysmore polyhives. Which
are you happy with your Maysmore?
I am, yeah, and I've got some wooden parts from Simon the Beekeeper that fit perfectly, but I've not been able to find a queen excluder yet. But I'm amazed. I mean, even half my colony that was in the wooden hive moved into the polyhive. They just kind of like up sticks in September. They moved next door. So that colony is huge, and that was a small colony, and now it's kind of the one that's thriving the best, really.
Yeah. Now, if Yvonne asks, does anyone not use queen excluders? And Rodri very well points out, unless you want eggs in your honey. So,
to an extent, yes, but you can see which frames have got eggs and which haven't. If they've gone up, into several supers, you get enough honey frames. It's not that catastrophic, really. It is better for the bees without a queen excluder, let's face it.
Well, they can decide how big the brood nest is, but they are much more likely, I think, to make it chimney shaped rather than wide. Which means you might end up with lots of deep frames in the bottom box with honey in, which when you're getting ready for winter is actually an advantage, isn't it? But all those supers with eggs in and brood in, you then just have to think if they start making drone underneath, then you might have, I don't know whether they do that because I've never given them more than 2 boxes to go at. So I've known there's drone brood between the 2 boxes, but if you had a 3rd box without a queen excluder, do they make drones at that
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't remember there being drone brood there.
Does Yvonne use queen excluders?
I suppose it all comes down to whether you want to extract honey or not, doesn't it? If you're not wanting to extract honey, you wouldn't maybe not bother, but
I have some without and some with. And what I found is I'll put them on double brood. She may go up into another super, but once that arch of honey's on top, that's the natural queen excluder. And she won't.
But do you never find her just having a stretch of her legs up in the supers?
You may do, yeah. But I can live with that on the ones that I've got without.
Right.
I mean, it's just experimenting. I always do something different every year just to see what happens.
Yeah, I know lots of people like to sort of just try things and say, well, that worked really well. And and quite often when you're starting out, you don't have the drawn comb to worry about sort of where the queen's wandering. So you want the queen to go up into your first super, because once she's been up there, all the bees will follow and go and actually draw the comb. I've found a couple of times with the queen excluder on, the bees are more reluctant to go up there. But that getting drawn comb is a different problem to getting drawn brace comb.
Good night. Diane, I've got a question saying happened this week that's baffled me a little bit. So I went to check someone's bees that went away for East Cornwall.
Yeah.
And they said to me, "Oh, can you go and check my bees to see if they've got any fondant on?" So I put my jacket on. I took the roof off. She put no crown bud on. She put the fondant with a hole in the bottom on top of the frames. There was a massive cluster of bees on top of the frames and the fondant on the plastic of the fondant. I mean, a massive cluster of bees.
Yeah.
Just on the roof. So I thought, maybe she just made a mistake. I put the roof back. Went to the next one, pulled it out, exactly the same. No crown board. Just put the fondant, cut a hole in the plastic, straight on top of the frames. That was all eaten. The other one wasn't. That was all eaten. Again, a massive cluster. So it's gone through all this cold weather in the last few weeks with no crown board, just roof, and there's 2 massive clusters. So it made me start to think whether we're doing the wrong thing in the winter by having a crown board on.
I don't think it hurts. I think the problem you will find
You
if
need
you
an
don't-
eek.
If you put an eek on for putting fondant on, then
Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. But she hasn't done that. She just put straight on the roof. No crown board.
If
Just
she's
straight
got
on.
oilseed rape, as soon as they start bringing that in, she won't be able to take the roof off.
No,
because
no.
they will just fill it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
with comb.
But up to say this week when I went to check the bees, I mean there were 2 colonies that I would have been proud of. To think that they, so I'm, because we were talking, was it last week, about the temperature and whether the temperature and put something on and do you get a lot of condensation on top of the crown board and everything else. Yeah. It just baffled me the fact that we all get told to put, and I just wonder whether the space between the top of the frames and the roof, which is a Thorns roof, so it's quite a thick roof, there's quite a big space there. Whether the bees because they were all on top of the frames. I mean, this cluster was enormous. So I'm wondering whether they like that space being up there, where it's nice and warm, and there's space up there.
Yvonne's asking what hive has she got? Has she just got a national?
40 by 12, yeah, 40 by 12, 2
Right.
40 by 12s.
I'm
just beginning to think they must like that because
it is the damp that kills bees, not cold. So as long as they've got lots and lots of food, but if they're all over the fondant, I would assume they haven't actually got. Otherwise, they
one
stay on
ate all the
honey.
fondant, one didn't. But somebody did say to me, "Well, you really need to look to see what's in the frames because there might be millions of bees. What's in the frames? Obviously, you can't go in at the moment and have a quick look because you'd have to move. You couldn't even just take one sneaky frame out and have a look because all the bees were on top of it. But I just found it unusual because I've never left the crown board off. And I'm just wondering whether that gives them more.
There's an old guy in my local group. He doesn't use crown boards, and he puts fondant on top with an eek and then his roof. He doesn't use crown boards.
Wow.
Like an anti-insulate. He's like, I leave my bees for winter. They'll look after themselves.
So he just. But if he puts it, if he leaves the roof, he doesn't. If he leaves the roof, the crown board off, he doesn't need to put an eek on because there's a space between the roof when the roof sits on the brood
It
box.
probably depends
There's a
how
space
your
already.
roof's built.
Okay,
Yeah,
I've got nationals.
they're
I've
not-
got some thorns.
I'm sure he said he uses an eek and then a roof. He doesn't use a crown board. I think it's just a choice, isn't it? Like some people like
But it's just so
hiding
different
if they're
that
feeding as well that they can use it through the porter holes.
Yeah.
If
It makes it
you
hard
want
for
to,
checking them surely during the colder bits because you're kind of letting in. You take the roof off and you're letting all the cold air in. So
but how much? The argument would be against that is how much difference does a thin piece of plywood crown board make anyway? and this is the other side of the argument, isn't it? If you read all the stuff about insulating your hives, they'd all have 6 inches of kingspan all round them and on top, and they'd probably be in poly boxes to start with. But it is the damp that will cause them a problem. And if there's nowhere for the damp to condensate other than the roof or the sides of the boxes, then is it going to drip into the hive because there's no crown board to catch the condensation? Or is it, I don't know. It's something you'd have to play with quite a lot.
Yeah, I just found it odd that, and I rang her up and I said, I FaceTimed her because I was going to someone else's hive, and I said, do you always leave the crown board off? And she said, yeah, I do, yeah. Yeah, why don't you? I said, well, no, not really.
How many years has she kept bees?
A couple of years. But I tell you what, the 2 colonies I was absolutely proud of. I said, well, how do you do? I said, well, I put my crown board on. I just put my fondant on the top of the crown board, and then the roof on. So that's what I done. That's what I done then. I'm thinking, I hope she doesn't come back and all the bees are dead.
Because you've looked at them, it will be your fault.
Because I've now changed it, and she was like, well, when you went in there. But I just found it so that most of the bees, well, I don't know how many was in the frames, so I didn't have a look, but there was massive. I mean, there was enough to sort of that the height of the fondant as a great big massive bees on the top and sort of hanging on to sort of on the edge of the food. I just found it, and they're both exactly the same.
I would be interested in the ones that have ate the fondant, because they've obviously chosen to eat the fondant rather than honey, and that might mean that they're too far away from the food in the hive.
Yeah, but maybe.
Someone's asking about, should you insulate wooden hives for winter? I have a couple of years put a piece of kingspan on top of the crown board under the roof, but you need an extra box to put it in because kingspan's quite deep. And I didn't have enough eeks and things for all my hives, so I stopped doing it, and it made very little difference. I think the important thing is to make sure they've got enough food and that you've got varroa-free bees or as near varroa-free going into winter. That's the important thing for making sure they get through. There are people who buy these. Have you seen the hive cozies? They look like sort of giant tea cozies, and you put it over your hive. But the concern would be, where does the condensation go then? Does it condensate inside the hive more, or does it run down the outside of the inside of the cozy? I don't know. And then if you read the Derek Mitchell research, then yes, we should insulate our hives because that lets them use less food to keep the same temperature.
But then they have to use more energy to create to keep it at the temperature that they like, not the temperature that we put them into. So if it's too hot, they'll have to make it cooler, and if it's too cool, they'll have to make it hotter. So it's. I think you should just leave it. I think
they don't get anybody insulating the tree. If they live in a hollow tree, as they were intended, nobody's going to come and put a jacket around it.
Exactly.
I put
I think
that's
I
good.
put,
3 inches thick.
Here again. What was
I
the
put
last
insulation
topic?
around my boxes, and that seems to work well for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I was ending up with leaky roofs, which were then the runners along the top of the brood box and the supers were filling up with water because it was what's the word when the water snipped up the inside? Yeah, it's not the right word, but I know what you mean.
Capillary action.
That's the word. I leave the bottoms open, so there's loads of ventilation. I don't get wet hives anymore, which is really nice because it keeps the wind off. But it seemed to me that my hives don't fit, on that horizontal plane, don't fit beautifully. And putting that cover around is like wearing an anorak, or a cagoule to keep the wind off. And I think the wind chills a thing. But I find I don't think I get a better success rate through the winter, but I do find they use a lot less food because they're warmer, I guess. I don't know.
There is the counter argument. They are not clustering as deeply because they are insulated, and therefore they need to eat more food because they're not as clustered because of the temperature.
I don't
know.
experience that. I leave it
No.
on over the summer as well, and that actually keeps them cooler because where my hives are, the beating sun on them is quite fierce. The only thing I found was because I got this stuff cheap, but I used 2-inch because 4-inch, which I got given, is way too thick. It's like manhandling Mr. Blobby to get it on your hives. I use a 2-inch one, but I did keep it. I did use the plain silver and didn't paint it. And I found that when I took them off, the bees didn't quite know where home was because they were looking for a silver hive. But then, so I've now painted them a normal hive colour, and they seem to be a lot
But
happier
don't get
with that.
confused when you take it off. No.
No.
But Derek wanted to say something. Your chance now, Derek. No.
I forgot what it was.
Right. Now, Rodri's saying he saw on a video someone bent their crown board so the middle was lower. So when he takes the roof off, he doesn't lose as much heat. I don't know how that works, but I know when you insulate, if you do have to go and do anything, it feels like you're letting a lot of heat out. But it's probably only the same amount as you let out when there isn't any, because it's the bees keep it as warm as they want it, and you're just stopping it coming up through the top. It's still going to radiate at the sides, isn't it, if you've only got top insulation?
Yeah, I don't do that.
No, Yvonne never has. Eddie's gone. So how long have you been beekeeping, Rodri?
I think since last June or July.
Lovely. And do you like it a lot?
Yeah.
Excellent. Have you got stung a lot?
Well, I've been stung twice, and once with a fellow beekeeper. And they also say you're not a proper beekeeper till you get stung. But I don't think that. I think if you're stung, you know that you're agitating them, so you better stop.
Absolutely. Yes. Most of my first stings were when I started, I wore these stupid big yellow leathery gloves that came with my hive kit. And that meant when I picked a frame out, I couldn't feel the bees under that end bit. And so I would squash a bee and that bee would sting me. So most of my stings were in my fingers, picking frames out. And when I started with the nitrile gloves, I found I could feel the bee. So I would touch the bee and tickle it and it would move, and then I didn't get stung. So Yvonne asks for Rodri, what do your friends think about you being a beekeeper?
Well, it is a rather unusual hobby, because I don't think anyone else is willing to maybe just keep a couple of insects. I know someone from my scout group who's keeping ants.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I think the way we think of that is that how they think of me.
Right, so
and maybe that they think that they're going to get cheap honey, not
Now, if Yvonne teaches beekeeping at a school, don't you, Yvonne?
I do indeed. We're at Ashbrow School in Huddersfield. We've had bees there for about 7 years now.
And you're quite well known on the school beekeeping circuit, aren't you?
Well, they tend to come. They tend to come to us. Have you got any bees? We've got orders in for this year so far. So we've got a bit of bee breeding to do in the spring. So we're looking forward to that. Get our children doing a bit of grafting.
Excellent, because they've got better eyesight than us grown ups sometimes, haven't they?
They find the queen every time. If you can't find the queen, get a child.
Yes, my friend used to bring his grandchild to beekeeping, and when he bought him, I always went and helped in case Jack decided he'd had quite enough of looking at bees. But he'd be pulling frames out, and Jack would go, "There's the queen," and it's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, well spotted."
Yeah, my son always finds it. He's 10. He always finds the queen way before me.
Yeah, that wasn't your 10-year-old I just saw though, was it, Lorraine?
No, that's
No.
the toddler.
That's the
He's also got a suit. He's probably going to be my most willing / the last child with less options. Helper, hopefully.
Right. Does Where's Wally help when you're finding queens? Is anyone ever spent hours looking at the Where's Wally books?
Yeah. If you can find like the tricky ones, Wally's not always the hardest, but yeah, if you can find the tricky ones, then yeah, you're probably good at queens.
Oh no, my queens hide underneath everywhere else. So
I'm terrible at finding them.
Has anyone got a book called Queen Spotting by Martha Kearney?
No.
No, I've seen it.
Absolutely brilliant book. It's got photographs all the way through it, so the pages actually fold outwards, so you get really long sort of panoramic pictures of bees on the comb, and they start really easy, so you can spot the queen really easy. But every picture you've got to spot the queen, and it's a brilliant book. So I suggest everybody gets that if you want a bit of fun.
Oh, Diane does an evening of bee spotting on one
We
of hers.
did, didn't we? Yes,
Yeah.
we've done it twice actually, and I will say the second time through, the elusive queens were equally elusive as they had been the first time. So it's not remembering where they are; it is genuinely spotting them, isn't it? But yes, that's always quite a fun evening to spend looking for a queen, and left a bit, down a bit. Right. So sorry, Rodri, you're the youngest person here, so you're the most exciting person I think we've had visit for a
About
while.
30 years
So,
probably.
yeah. Normally I'm one of the youngest beekeepers when I go to meetings and things, but we do need lots more young beekeepers. So it's really good the work Yvonne and other people do teaching children at school. And it is really nice to know you're interested enough to come and spend your evening listening to us talk about bees.
Yeah, I'm going to tell my 10-year-old that you were here, Rodri. See if that guilts him into feeling a bit more excited.
Evil mum.
Look at your opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean,
just tell him he can make a fortune selling honey at school, and he'll be in.
That's a proper captive marketplace, that, isn't it? See, I don't go out to work. I work from home, so my workplace is here. So my selling honey opportunities at work are very limited. It's husband brings me a cup of tea and would you like to buy a jar of honey? No, thank you. I've got some in your kitchen. Whereas people who go out to work, they can sell their wares at work very easily, can't they?
Well,
Well,
my new person at work who works for me, he's a bloody beekeeper, so he's already cornered that market.
Oh no.
Oh no.
I don't work anymore, but if we ever get out of lockdown, I do dog shows. So that would be quite a good place to sell honey, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know someone near me who was selling lots of honey to someone who fed it his dog. Like they'd come and buy 3 or 4 jars at a time, and it's like
that can't be good for them. Not in that quantity.
No, I mean it's only every other month or something. It was coming, but it does mean the dog's eating a jar of honey a week nearly.
My dog won't touch it.
I'm hoping to capture an allergy market. And my husband's got terrible hay fever, and there's like small amounts of research saying about like almost like a desensitizing.
Yeah, and when you sell your honey, it's best to say, I've been told by someone who buys my honey, it's very helpful with their hay fever. And then you're not promising any medical claims. You just
help. Yeah. Those hay fever folk get desperate, don't they?
Yes.
The potions that we've had in our house. Yeah, have a jar of honey.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it arthritis? There's something, isn't there, that people reckon if you sting yourself with bees all the time, it helps.
Yes, apitherapy, I think it's called, isn't it?
I don't think I fancy that.
I think Gwyneth Paltrow does a lot of that.
She's weird though.
We had a talk. We had a talk from the specialist in the hospital on allergies, and she said the best type of bee sting to get is no bee stings. She said you never know when you're going to be affected by it. Just because you survived the last one doesn't mean you'll survive the next one.
Ah, you see, we had one from Sheffield University, and they said if you're allergic, you're allergic. It doesn't matter whether you're stung once or you don't suddenly become immune or unimmune. So that's like two different sides of the story from similar.
It's like asking two beekeepers a question. You're going to get at least 3 different answers, aren't you? Yeah.
You can become allergic to any chemical in the world, but bee stings, anything venom, has got a much higher chance of causing irritation.
Yeah.
And whatever it is that makes you get anaphylactic when you haven't been.
I know
whereas, the Sheffield University study said that wasn't the case, which is weird. But,
I always say, have you got a reference for that?
Yeah, I did question it because I wasn't allergic to penicillin when I was a kid, and then I became allergic to penicillin when I was older. And she said, no, you should have always been allergic. I was like, no, I wasn't. So it kind of didn't quite balance her argument.
Some kids have like a intolerance, but that's not the same quite as allergy. Like anaphylaxis allergies, different.
Yeah, one of the penicillins makes me sick, and I always thought that meant I was allergic because it'd make me properly vomit everywhere. And the doctor said, no, that's not an allergy. That's just it doesn't agree with you. So
my entire body turned into kind of lumps and big. It was hideous. It was the worst thing ever.
Horrible. I'm allergic to nickel, so I can avoid that most of the time.
I had a friend who had to give up beekeeping because he had some internal complaint with one of his organs, and they tested him for this, that, and the other and couldn't find it. And when he said, does the fact I'm a beekeeper make any difference? And the bloke nodded his head and said, I think we found a problem. You need to give up beekeeping. And he, to be fair, he used to get stung quite often because he was quite careless with his bee soup. But that wasn't so much an allergy as just a build-up of the venom affecting his internal organs. And another guy who kept bees for 40 years, I think he died in his early 70s. He was fit and young, but I think that was due to something build-up of stings over the year, of venom over the years. So I think it's just a case of whether it is or whether it's not. You just want to avoid it.
Yeah. On the general husbandry course I'd been on, out of the 16 people in the room, there was 4 beekeepers with EpiPens who wanted to continue in beekeeping. And I think it's crazy, but I'm not one of those with an EpiPen. And whilst I have said if I was properly allergic, I would give up beekeeping, you know, faced with that reality, I might change my mind. But I think I would be mad to do that.
But you just get Nick to follow you around with an EpiPen.
You can't just jag and carry on the inspection. The back of a wagon and went to hospital, you know.
It wouldn't be good, I think. So.
No, I think
so
it's
I
mad.
came to get my bees.
What's that, Ken? Sorry.
That's how I came to get my bees. I've got them off a fellow who had to retire because he was allergic. He had become allergic to the bees.
That's just lucky. It's lucky for you, but it's very sad for him. Do you take them a jar of honey every year?
I only got them in back end of September.
Oh right, you're all right then. So it's something to always think about and applies to those beekeepers who stop beekeeping when they can no longer lift a super. If you know of a beekeeper who doesn't keep bees anymore through whatever reason, allergy or old age, it's a nice thought to drop round with a jar of honey and say hello, and say the bees say hello as well.
That's thought.
Go on, what was that, Lorraine?
Said that's thoughtful.
Yes, it wasn't me who sort of nudged me about it. I think Kirk, and there was another beekeeper who said, "Oh, I must send a jar of honey to someone they knew had given up recently."
Well, I've been giving jars of honey to people that I want to put beehives in their It's like, oh, you've got a national house.
How do you feel about your garden? What about, I don't know, about 4 meters left?
Good night, Claire.
Yes, it did, honey.
Yeah. Go on, Steve.
Just a quick one. At the moment, obviously everybody uses a crown board, and then obviously if you're feeding like you put an eek on the top of it. What I was thinking of doing was making something like that, which would be a crown board and an eek combined, so I could use a syrup feeder in the summer months, in early spring, and then turn it upside down for the winter months, so I could put the fondant on top of the frames.
Ah,
So
that's
it's like a crown board and eek all in one. Save, and that would save an extra joint for the draft and all that to get in. It's just actually one board. So winter time you could put fondant on top of the frames and you still got a crown board above it. Summertime, you got crown board on top of the frames and your bowl of syrup on top.
Yeah,
that's similar to what we've done.
I'll take two.
We turned our feeder upside down. So we
Miller feeder.
Cairns make the one.
Do they?
Yeah. But for the poly hives.
Oh, right, okay. I've got wooden nationals, so that I was just going to make one myself out of like sort of 70 or 80 mil pine frame, rebate it on the sawn, put a plywood crown board in.
And then he'd probably win a prize in the Devon Honey Show again for his invention. he won a prize last year, didn't you?
No, board, wasn't it? Something.
Got Dragon's Den with it.
Steve, do you make?
Let us try them.
Do you make Bailey boards, Steve? Because I'd better buy one off you. Because next year, probably not this year, but next year I probably want to do a Bailey cone chain.
Yeah, I could probably make one. Yeah, I'll get the plans off of Dave Cushman's site or something. Yeah, I could make you one. Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know, because it'd probably be better than Thorns.
All right. I'll see what I can do for you.
Marvellous. Cheers, Steve.
No problem.
I owe you one for the vodka anyway.
Right. Anything else? Let's go and see what's going on in the chat. Get that patented, Steve. Don't tell Thorns all they've been making one. I have got a talk coming up with people's inventions, things they built for their hives that I've yet to finish putting together because people have sent me lots of photos. But that's got quite an interesting feeding board in that someone's made. So rather than feeding through porterholes, there's actually a strip available all the way along the crown board, so you can just put the fondant where you need to.
Yes, my club have been doing that. They've got the bubble wrap stuff that's insulated that I think you normally put in a loft or somewhere, and they've cut a slit down the middle. So they've cut it the size of a crown board, a slit down the middle, and put the fondant all the way down the middle.
Yeah.
And it keeps them insulated, and they get access to the fondant all the way through the hive. So it seems like a good idea.
It does. Yeah, someone said, well, yeah. I'm just reading the messages. Sorry, easily distracted me, I'm afraid.
Has anybody seen those like wasp-proof floors where it's like a front entrance for the bees and they have to go up into the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Nick's building me some based on the guy at Black Mountain Honey who's done a video with the plans in about it.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Someone very kindly gave us a load of wood, so it was meant to be.
So obviously you've got a reduced for a floor, haven't you? Because obviously some of that becomes wood for the like 8 mil entrance for your bees.
Yeah.
But I reckon you don't have to have a mouse guard. You can leave a full vent open all year.
Yeah. It's got lots of advantages if it works well. Normally, you don't get an awful lot of brood at the front of the hive. In my experience, they are much more likely to be towards the back. So I wouldn't worry about having a varroa drop at the front.
Yeah. Mine have been out yesterday and today, so I've taken both my mouse guards off because they were struggling to get in. One hive I've got on the large aperture opening and one hive I've got on the small aperture opening, and their legs are absolutely covered in like sort of an orangey yellow pollen.
Has everybody been out? Mine, like I've had a couple on the front. They must have been out.
You're Scotland.
The first very nice day, it was like Piccadilly Circus, because
Monday.
all the bees that had hatched recently came out for a little fly round to look at where they were, where they live. So they all came out and did all this swirling. So it looked much busier than the days after, when bees were coming out, seeing if there's any pollen about.
Yeah.
And there's not tons of stuff out at the moment. There's pollen, I think. There won't be very much nectar anywhere, just because it's so cold, but the pollen's started. But if you're going to go and look at your hive this time of year, please put a hood on, because you really don't want to get a sting, because all those bees will have lots of venom. The ones coming out regularly will be jam-packed full of venom, will give you a really swollen face.
Yeah, I got stung on Tuesday.
Oh.
So Rodri says there's an Amazon Prime series called Masters of Bees, explains about the bees and the way people keep them all around the world. So if you've got Amazon Prime, you'll have to go and look at that. I think we're on our last week of it, so I'll have to go and have a look at that now, won't I?
Are you going to give it up?
The Prime, he got it for Christmas. I forgot to cancel it because he thought he'd bought it on one date and didn't, and so we've ended up with it for another month. We don't normally have it. I don't think there's an awful lot to watch on Prime. I get really bored of scrolling through. After sort of 20 minutes of scrolling through, I'll go to Netflix and find something straight away. Maybe I like more Netflix tap.
But the delivery, Diane, what are you going to do? Wait for 3 days for stuff?
The last things I bought was books, actually. And that was a honey book about heather honey, and then a managing mini newts, and they didn't come from Amazon. So I had to wait 2 days, I think, for those. And it was like,
I'm a slight eco warrior. Like, my friends and family hate me for the loofahs and the, compost bins and all that stuff. But it's my biggest guilty pleasure. I can't imagine my life without Amazon Prime. I love it.
Do you recycle all the packaging by sending other people things in it? Because
Yeah,
we
do.
have to wait till a
Sometimes,
box
yeah.
arrives the right size. And then I go, I can send my mum something.
Yeah. My dad lives in France, so I do send him quite a lot, of smallish kind of packages. So I do love it.
I buy my stuff from eBay if I can, because I always think I prefer to give my money to small businesses direct and give it to Amazon Prime.
And I know it's a much better thing to do for the world. I know it is, but it's just so disorganized. Like, see,
I do Prime at Christmas
on Tuesday and all that, and you go, oh well.
I do Amazon. I do Amazon at Christmas because it's just easier to use if people put lists up. But I must admit, I've only ever had Prime accidentally.
You can get your groceries and all that as well. They deliver bulk. Brilliant. Honestly.
Yeah, my friends started shopping at Morrison's via Amazon, and the man goes to the local supermarket, puts it in paper bags and brings it to her house half an hour after she's ordered it. It would take her that long to be asked getting in the car, putting her shoes on, going in and getting it and coming home.
Brilliant. Like, the man deserved his gazillions. He deserves them. No grudges. No grudges.
See, I go to the supermarket now just to get out of the house of my weekly trip out.
Yeah.
I'm like Lorraine. I've been with Amazon Prime for about 4 or 5 years. Order it tonight. It's here tomorrow morning.
Love it. Like, so patient. See, when you order, I bought new boots and it was from Shoe, and they were and it was quite reasonable. Like, it also annoys me to pay for delivery for stuff, but it was like £4 or something for delivery,